Well, it has so far been a very long week for me, compiling information from AMD, Nvidia, and Intel sources on upcoming releases this fall. And anytime there is one of those weeks like this one, where I just have tons of information coming in about tons of different products, I just start organizing them into different scripts. And then when one of those scripts, either it's a combination really of both, of feeling more pressing and feeling more complete, once one of those scripts feels complete and feels more pressing than the other one, well, that's the video that comes out first. And I say that because, don't worry, I've got a lot more Intel information coming about the upcoming Raptor Lake launch and about what the heck's going on at Intel AXG. But I honestly suspect that I'll have to address some more odd public statements from the company soon, and so let's just combine those leaks with me addressing those statements. And today, let's talk mostly about Nvidia, who, well, is actually launching graphics cards this fall you guys probably want. So recently, many of you will notice, if you follow Moore's Law is Dead on Twitter, that I leaked that the RTX 4090 would be launching the first half of October, and then the RTX 4080 and something else, something that looked like what should be a 4070 or 4070 Ti, will be launching the first half of November. And then I added a lot more context about those products on the recent Broken Silicon. Mostly, actually, I talked about why those are the models coming out this fall, and most of it had to do with, well, the Ampere oversupply situation Nvidia is trying to find a way to deal with. You see, I confirmed in the last Broken Silicon that Nvidia has, well, so many new Ampere cards still to sell that they might not get through all of them for over a year, and that very soon, there's going to be many more used cards flooding eBay with, well, it's happening, Ethereum at least trying to go proof of stake. And here's the thing. I could have waited to put this video out until after Ethereum went proof of stake and then given it an extra day or two to see what happens. But the fact of the matter is this. It doesn't really matter. If Ethereum were to fall apart, then that means there's going to be a bunch of cards that can't mine it anymore. If Ethereum goes proof of stake, then there's a bunch of cards that can't mine it anymore. And no matter what happens, I still think a lot of these mining cards aren't going to want to switch to other coins. Many of them will, but most of the larger firms I've talked to say they want to switch to Bitcoin mining. They have the money, they have the funding. They're going to sell off, dump their cards once Ethereum's done, right when it goes proof of stake, because they'd like to mine that up until the last minute. They're going to take that money and invest in a coin that has a more certain future in their eyes. Now, the smaller mom and pop miners, they'll probably just switch to some other variant of Ethereum or whatever crap coin. I don't know. But I still think no matter how you dice it, next week you're going to see millions more Ampere cards hit eBay. And so if you think about it, what makes sense to launch if you've got to compete with, well, probably $700 or less RTX 3090s on eBay? Well, the RTX 4090 won't be an issue, right? And I covered on Broken Silicon that I do believe, both because of this and because of, honestly, much more expensive board costs and die costs than Lovelace, the RTX 4090 is probably going to be priced above $1,500, but most likely below $2,500. So somewhere in that range. I can't promise you where they'll decide to put it, but it's going to be more than the 3090. And then you go down to the RTX 4080, which I do believe will be a 16 gigabyte card based on GA103. That is, of course, stronger than the 3090 Ti by quite a bit, at least a tier or two, but at least one tier and a half or so behind the RTX 4090. Well, I would say putting it at $1,000 is probably the most they would do. I can't promise you they won't try $1,200, but I think it's safe to say it would be between $800 to $1,200 for the RTX 4080 16 gigabyte. And then you go, okay, well, that makes sense. Solidly stronger than the 3090 Ti. And, it'll be there for the enthusiasts that want it. What about what comes after that? And, well, here's the thing. I've seen the rumors out there about a 4080 12 gigabyte launching next to the 16 gigabyte model. But until I could get a bunch of information confirming or denying that from a bunch of sources, I didn't really want to comment on it because I just thought it sounded wonky. But, well, let me put the new quotes on screen from multiple sources that I think are very important to today's video about Nvidia Lovelace. So this first source here was integral to that tweet leak I put out last Sunday. This person maintained that the 4090 was still launching the first half of October and that the 4080 and something else as of now was still planned to launch the first half of November. And this is worth emphasizing. This person, who I trust, there's proof that there is a third card launching next to the 4090 and the 4080. It's really all I can say. And so, well, we're just left to kind of speculate, at least this person is, on what it is, because this person themselves could not confirm it. But we both agreed that launching a 4070 in a market that everything new needs to be priced above $700 because of the flood of used Ethereum cards and even the tons of new Ampere cards that haven't been sold yet are still there. I don't know that you can easily get away with charging like $700 for a 4070. I think, though, that you could probably get away with charging $700 for a 4070 Ti as long as it at least narrowly beat the 3090 Ti. And then that could be below like a $900 4080. Again, not confirming exact pricing, guys. And then, of course, the 4090 that's priced way above and way higher performance than anything else from Ampere. So that's why I feel like 4070 Ti made the most sense based on this information from the source that I really do trust a lot, because I think it's hard for, or will be hard for, consumers to swallow Nvidia adding $200 to the MSRP of the 4070, even if that 3070 MSRP was fake. But, well, then came in information from other sources. One source telling me that the 4090 and the 4080 16, this person said this, 16 and 12 gigabyte launch in November. And again, I don't talk to any sources that I don't have good track records with. This person couldn't get more information than that, but, well, then I had to start taking these ridiculous rumors of a 4080 12 gigabyte seriously. A third source then came in and told me 4090 launches October and 4080 models, I didn't put it on here, but it's 4080 models launch November. And this person could also confirm that multiple AIB 4090s have dual BIOS options. There's a 450 watt BIOS and a 660 watt BIOS. The 450 watt BIOS is there so they can promise that existing power supplies can run it, because apparently that high power mode BIOS in the 4090 is just going to wreck any power supply that isn't way overbuilt in one of the newest ones, which is just, well, that's its own thing. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. This person could only confirm 4090 and 4080 models, and I have another source, sure, there's a third model, and then another source saying there is a 12 gigabyte 4080. And then I have a fourth source saying that the 4090, this is really just backing up the third source here, will come with a standard 450 watt mode and an over 600 watt overclock mode. And so there you go. I have four of my best sources here, not saying all of the same things, but they all seem to be overlapping with at least two of the other ones in some form or fashion. One of my best sources saying 4090, 4080, something else. Another source saying 4090, 4080, 16 and 12 gigabyte. Another source saying 4090, and then a 4080 set of models. And then that one overlaps with another one of my best sources that says the same thing, that the 4090 has an insane mode BIOS and a 450 watt BIOS for, well, normal power supplies. What I'm forced to conclude here is a few things. And I'm going to be honest, until Nvidia actually goes on stage and says 4080 12 gigabyte and also 4080 16 gigabyte, it's just going to be hard for me to believe they would actually do this. I still think there's a good chance Nvidia, quite honestly, is feeding misinformation to almost everyone but the highest levels of their corporation, just because they can. They do this before every leak, and that whatever they're going to launch, it would make the most sense to make that third model that I'm sure is coming out be the 4070 Ti, because if people were willing to pay at least $1,600 for a 3070 Ti, well, let's be honest, for the most of its life, well over $700, then I think they probably also would for a 4070 Ti that is stronger than all of these sub-$700 3090s on eBay. Having said all of that, there really does seem to be a lot of smoke out there amongst a lot of sources I trust that a 4080 12 gigabyte model could be coming. And so, well, I took it seriously and really did think about it. And I actually do think I have a non-insane argument for why this thing might exist. And, well, here's what you got to think about first. What could the 4080 12GB actually be based on? Well, really only one of two things. Either it's an 8103 die, which in its full configuration has a 256-bit bus. That's where you get to 16GB for that one model. They would have to disable that down to 192-bit and give it 12GB, and then they make a little extra profit on that card because they don't have to give it as much RAM. Okay, maybe that also gives them some flexibility down the line if RAM costs exploded again. And, well, you know, if you think about it, if there are some yields of 8103, enough yields that need to be disabled more than 20%, disabling, you know, about a fourth of the bus doesn't really make that much of a difference to performance. It's already going to be that much less in compute performance. Might as well disable part of the bus, save some extra money, don't give people more RAM than they need. 12GB is enough for 4K, so it could be that. But additionally, it could honestly be AD104, which is an entirely different die and would leave, yeah, I think a 20 to 35% gulf in performance between these 16GB and the 12GB models of the 4080. And I do think that'd be the most likely thing they would use for any 4080 12GB, actually using AD104. But here's the thing, guys. This is why they might do it. They know it might narrowly beat the 3090 Ti. Probably with even better ray tracing the 3090 Ti. So if it does, well, they can argue it's better than all previous gen flagships, including the recent one that technically launched for $2,000. And they could then say, hey, look, this thing is just a lower VRAM version of the other 4080 that we're going to charge $800 or $1,000 or something for. But that is 16GB. It crushes the previous generation. Just like we had a 3080 12GB and a 3080 10GB. Doesn't matter if they're different dies. It's the same situation, they would argue, even though those cards were much closer to each other in performance, and go, this is the 4080 12GB. It is still stronger than all previous gen flagships. And because it's stronger than the previous gen flagships, it gets to be 80 class. And because it's 80 class, guys, we can charge $700 or $800, and we're hoping you won't complain. Don't complain about the $700 104 card. It's not a 4070. It's not a 4070 Ti. It's a 4080 12GB, and it warrants the price of at least the previous gen 3080 that it beats by probably at least 30%. This bizarre 8104 based 4080 12GB, if it really is what Nvidia launches, is just a casualty of them trying to have their cake and eat it too, just like they always try to do, as I've covered on this channel. But in this case, it's trying to find a way, while using really expensive boards, really expensive cooling, and a really expensive TSMC 4nm node this gen, justify a way to milk their mid-range die as much as possible because they're honestly worried about margins. Because RDNA 3 is going to be a lot more economical. And, well, I want to talk about RDNA 3 a bit and also what the heck's going on with Nvidia's high power consumption strategy at the 4090. But first, an ad from a sponsor.
Reese, what is it? And what's this message over here? You want treats, belly rubs, walks, and to not overpay for Windows keys.
Well, I can definitely handle the treats, belly rubs, and walks on my own. I can't help Reese with getting reasonably priced Microsoft keys without CDKeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by CDKeyoffer.com, a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law's Dead and its community for any time someone in my community needs reasonably priced Office or Microsoft operating system keys without paying excessive monopolistic pricing. But that's not all they offer either. They also have great deals on PlayStation, Steam, Origin, and Uplay keys, and physical products like gaming chairs and keyboards and mice as well. They are always running sales, but make sure you use the best code possible provided for Moore's Law's Dead fans for the biggest discount. Use the links in the description or on screen, and then the code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Windows codes or die shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. Being on these links really does help the channel a lot, and using the offer codes helps it even more. It keeps CDKey Offer as a reliable sponsor for this community and for you to use again in the future as they keep sponsoring us. Go to CDKeyoffer.com today. So, like I confirmed in the first part of this video, there's definitely a something coming below the 4080 16GB, and then there's also a 4090 24GB coming that has a 450 watt BIOS option and a 600 watt plus BIOS option. I am told that this 4090 costs an absurd amount of money to make, that many AIB models will be 4 slots or more, and that, if we're being honest, it's going to be hard for Nvidia to profit even at 3090 prices, that you really should expect it to be more and be up to $2,500. Now, could it be $1,700 or $2,000? Yes, but it's going to be more than the 3090, and it's because, well, Nvidia wants the crown, and they want to be able to price everything they launch now far above the previous generation as well. They have too many cards of. That's Nvidia's way of doing things. From what I'm starting to hear recently, AMD actually seems to be having another way of doing things with RDNA 3, and I want to put up on screen some Navi 31 quotes that I've been compiling this week. Now, the first source tells me that the AIBs are working on RX 7900 XTs that consume over 400 watts for some of the models, but that this is more than the reference model, at least for now. Another source tells me that he does not expect the 7900 XTs to use more than air cooling, and almost certainly they will stay below 350 watts. Maybe they'll use more than the 6900 XT, but you really shouldn't expect it to use much more energy than the 6950 XT, and that, hey, AIBs will be able to overclock the living crap out of them if they want to. A third source told me that the original design was below 375 watts, but a bit above 300. This person didn't want to say more than that, and did remind me that they could, if they wanted to, AMD could push it hard at the last minute, but that, at least right now, that's not what this person thinks AMD is going to do. And then the fourth source, well, this person gave a ton of context. This person told me that the reference 7900 XT will use well below 450 watts of power, and that is because it makes absolutely no sense to give up everything for the crown this fall. Maybe other falls where you can't get a hold of a graphics card and people will pay $3,000 for a flagship, like what happened last year. But that's not this year. That AMD is deciding to let Nvidia fight with itself for an oversaturated enthusiast market dealing with a recession right now, and that if AIBs want to clock Navi 31 to the moon, like that first source tells me some of them are, then they can. And it is up to the AIBs to deal with the cooling costs and the warranty issues themselves, because a lot of people do expect warranty problems with the top Lovelace cards this year, and AMD doesn't want to deal with it. They don't have the money to deal with it. They don't want to get known for having hot cards. I think AMD honestly sees a new, unique opportunity this fall. Look, the market is oversaturated with graphics cards. It's going to be hard to sell anything for an expensive amount of money in a recession. And here we go. Nvidia's just going for it. I think AMD's thinking this. Here's our chance to make Nvidia be remembered for being the hot and loud company moving forward. People already think of Ampere as hot and loud. Let's let them double down. They can be known as the company that uses too much energy. Finally, maybe we can get some of that stigma removed from the Radeon brand. And at the end of the day, any extra overclocking we do is going to add to the board cost, make it harder to sell for a reasonable amount. And as has been recently leaked by Angstronomics specifically, it's not as big of a card as you might think. So they can probably charge a lot less if they don't go buck wild. And it sounds like, and again, could AMD decide to overclock it? Maybe. Do I think a lot of AIBs will? Yes. But it's sounding like AMD's deciding not to shoot for the moon, to just be up there hanging with NVIDIA's best cards and use way less energy so they can let NVIDIA get the stigma and they themselves sell cards for a reasonable price in a recession. And after all, I do think it is worth remembering that if the market were to sell out of cards faster than people expect, and then they see the performance of the 4090 and go, yeah, with faster memory and higher clocks, we can definitely beat that, AMD can still launch a 7950 XT. In fact, I'd almost promise you they're going to eventually launch some 7950 XT. Why abandon efficiency out of the gate? Do that when you know what you need to hit to beat Nvidia. Do that next year, hopefully when a recession is subsiding. I think that's what AMD's planning to do. And you know, I really can't emphasize this enough. Everyone I talk to, both at Nvidia and who works with Nvidia, is worried about Lovelace. They're not worried about its performance. It's going to perform well. What they're worried about is if they're going to be able to sell enough of them to make up for the massive amount of capacity they've reserved on 4 nanometer with TSMC. Nvidia's really stuck in a pickle here, but there's nothing they can do. Once you buy up that capacity from TSMC, you've bought it. And this is a problem it doesn't seem like AMD actually has. I'm starting to get the feeling that what AMD's decided to do is just shift priorities when it makes sense for their business. I think AMD is going to supply Navi 31. It's going to be great. It's going to be efficient. It's going to be right up there with the top Lovelace cards. Who knows who's going to take the crown? I've said I'm not 100% sure who will. And remember, whoever takes the crown this fall, it's not over. I still think Nvidia is going to launch another model above the 4090, which will be in another video. I actually have some information on that. Then AMD is going to launch some 7950 XT. But, for this fall, let's just launch a good high-end card that makes Nvidia look silly, and then focus all of our supply that we can for 5 nanometer, for 6 nanometer on Zen 4, because Intel is much more competitive this fall than they've been in recent years. But they know, and I'm going to cover this in another Intel video, I'll confirm it here now though, that Raptor Lake supply seems like it's going to be a lot worse than Zen 4 at first. So might as well, in the market where whoever has the most available is actually the one who wins, not the GPU market that has too much supply, I think AMD is going to switch as much capacity as they can this fall to Zen 4 production from some of RDNA 3, and anything they have to use for RDNA 3, I think they're going to focus Navi 33 and Navi 32 on laptop because they know they're going to win in efficiency, and they know that, well, no one's putting used graphics cards in laptops, so let's focus our RDNA 3 supply there. So in conclusion, Nvidia is doing what they think is best for what the hand they've been dealt this fall. They think they need to keep the crown, and they think they need to push their cards as hard as possible so they can justify launching those cards as 4080 and higher class, or tell you that's what they are, so they can charge more and hopefully get you to still buy the existing Ampere cards on the market at the same time as enthusiasts gobble up Lovelace. But AMD seems to be taking a different route. They're not going to go crazy. They can launch a 7950 XT that hits 400 or 500 watts or whatever, whenever they want to, but the market is in a recession. It doesn't want that right now. Let's launch good high-end cards that compete with Lovelace, not throw efficiency out, and then, once those are launched, focus as much of the mid-range RDNA 3 supply, Navi 32 and 33 as we can, on laptop where there are no used cards to compete with, and get people to buy AMD laptops, well, that also have Phoenix that I think is going to blow Intel out of the water. And then once things make sense, they will launch the mid-range and low-end RDNA 3 products, and they will switch some of that Zen 4 supply, some of that RDNA 3 laptop supply back to desktop. But they just don't feel like it makes sense to do right now. And, well, that's about all I have to say about Lovelace and RDNA 3 in this video. But you can bet I will have a lot more updates, and I've got entire other sets of informations for leaks done now. But those are going to have to come in other videos. I need to get some sleep, so I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please make sure you subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button so you do not miss those upcoming leaks. And then if you like my content, please consider supporting my sponsors if you need any of their products. And, well, consider supporting me on Patreon, where you'll get early ad-free access to Broken Silicon, the ability to ask guest questions. We got an exciting one coming up talking about RDNA 3 and Lovelace that should come out early and even extra early to patrons this weekend if you are a patron at the proper tier. And, well, there's tons of other exclusive content like Die Shrink and stuff as well. So don't miss that if you have the extra $2, $4, or $10 or something a month for the Patreon. But otherwise, well, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching.